Okay, we will go ahead and get started again. It's 9:30. What we're going to talk about now is three things on the MicroStation side. One's going to be the name boundary, one's going to be the sheet index. If you want to utilize it, it's kind of going to be optional, and then also the printing, kind of how it's set up. And you've kind of seen some of this whenever we've done some of the WebExes, but you'll actually kind of do it by yourselves now and kind of see how it works and how it's set up. So one big change that is going to be used is what they call named boundaries within ORD. And like it showed on the PowerPoint, like what Randall was explaining, that replaces the plane and profile composition tool in Power Geopack. The name boundary tool kind of replaces that. And how it creates the sheets and how it creates a drawing model is going to be quite a bit different than what you have been used to in the past. So we'll kind of show how that works, let you guys work with it too, and then we will kind of go from there. So what I want you to do is come up to your file pull down. And let's go to open, and you can click on your browse right here. And technically it should be in the same location of what your current file is in, which is this typical section folder. Let's go ahead and open up this 002 TS01 file, which is typical section number 1 for this particular project. Let's go ahead and open up that file. I can either double left click on it, or I can do a single left click and click on open. And of course, it's going to prompt me to either check this one in or free it. I'll go ahead and check it in to save my changes. And what you will get is this typical section right here. I'll give everybody just a couple of minutes to open that up, and then we'll kind of explain a few more things before we start doing the name boundary. All right. Hopefully everybody has this particular file opened up. And basically what kind of the workflow will be is you can either place a named boundary out there and then place your geometry within that named boundary, which would then be reflected in your drawing model and your sheet model. Or like for this example here, I have my geometry already created. You know, if I had it over here or wherever that I need to, and then I could drag it into my named boundary. Or if I have this already kind of set up, like for this example, I can just place my named boundary around this geometry. And that's what we're going to do for this right here. So there's kind of multiple ways you could do this for however you want to place your name boundary, but we'll show how the tool works, and then you can apply it to whichever situation that you got. Now, whenever you use the name boundary tool, what it's going to do is it's going to create two other models inside your file. It's going to create a drawing model, and it's going to create a sheet model. The default model, like what we're currently in, would be where you place your plan geometry stuff, your line work, and so forth. And then after that, the drawing model that gets created, and we'll show how this is going to work here in a little bit. The drawing model normally is where you place that annotations and other stuff that really don't go inside of the drawing model. So inside your drawing, or excuse me, in the default model. So like in the drawing model, you'd place like notes, dimensions, text, scales, stuff like that that really doesn't go with the stuff that's in your plan geometry stuff inside your default model. And then in your sheet model would be where it's going to have the border file inside of it, and anything that's contained inside of the default model and the drawing model would be contained inside that sheet model. So basically your sheet model is a byproduct of the default model and your drawing model. And you really don't have to edit anything inside of the sheet model except for placing your text for your title block information. That'd be the only thing that you would need to add stuff inside of your sheet model. Because like I said, it's a byproduct of your drawing model and your default model. Okay, so to get to the name boundary tool and how it works, the way we're going to describe it in this particular portion of it is for like a detailed sheet, like let's say a typical section or your quantity sheets or your title sheet or maybe a special sheet, kind of miscellaneous sheets like that. We're going to show that particular side of it. There's other options inside of there which would allow you to go through there and go along an alignment or a profile that you have. And Bill's going to kind of go over that on the roadway side of it to where you can follow an alignment and kind of cut out your sheets or named boundaries like it's called now. You can place those named boundaries along that alignment and then it could go through there and it'll produce your sheet models and your drawing models accordingly. Same thing for your cross sections. But like I said, we're going to talk about using the name boundary tools for kind of like your detail sheets right now. So to get to your drawing model, or excuse me, your name boundary, we can get it to multiple locations. If I'm underneath the drawing workflow, I could go underneath there and I could go to, I think it's view. Yeah. This is one location that I can get to it, which is the name boundary. I'll probably, maybe a little bit more common one that you would use. I think it's also underneath the open roads modeling workflow. I think it's underneath drawing production. Name boundary tool is underneath there. I think it's also underneath the open roads drawing production. I think it's underneath drawing production there also. So the name boundary tool is in multiple workflows depending on which one that you have selected. You just got to know which one that you're using at that time. So for everyone to be consistent, let's go to the open roads modeling workflow. Open roads modeling workflow. And underneath there, let's scroll through your tabs up here at the top, and these are all broken out by different topics or different areas, and it should have those tools incorporated inside of that ribbon. So if I go to the drawing production ribbon, let's go ahead and select this name boundary tool right here. I'm not going to select this little icon here. We'll come back to that possibly later on, but let's select this little icon right here. Now inside your named boundary tool, you're going to have some different options across here, depending on what type of sheet that you're cutting. So if you're just creating a detailed sheet like what we're doing here, the one that we're going to utilize for this session is this third to last one that says from drawing boundary. From drawing boundary. So we will select it. Now, inside of here, we're going to have to change a couple things depending on what size that we want the border to be and so forth. So first thing is first, I'm going to change this from a bridge, since we're not in bridge, we're in design. So we'll select design, D-size sheet. Next thing is we have to give it a name. Now this name right here is going to be the name of of the named boundary. Not so much how it creates the drawing model or sheet model, but this is actually the name of the named boundary. And you'll kind of see that here in a second. So I'm going to go through here and I'm just going to name this typical section. That's all that I'm going to name that one. Next thing that I need to look at after I have my name, the description. That's optional. If you want to put something in there, you can. If not, don't worry about it. Next thing that I need to do is figure out what scale that I want to put it. So if I come down through here, you're going to see all the available scales that you can utilize. Of course, if you're in bridge, you'd utilize one of these scales through here, or if you're in design, you'd utilize one of these scales they're here. Kind of similar to how you use the place border tool inside of Power Geopack now. This is kind of the similar concept. So if I would happen to do a 1 to 5, and that's the one that we're going to use for this one right here, 1 inch equals 5 foot, you're gonna see on the end of your cursor, you're gonna see that boundary. So basically anything that is inside of this boundary is gonna be inside of your border whenever you get to your sheet model. Okay, I'm not gonna place this one yet, but of course if you come in here and you change your scale to 1 to 10, of course it's gonna be a bigger, because it's a bigger size, of course. Okay. So I will go back to the 1 inch equals 5 foot. I'm going to leave this option right here unchecked for the time being. And we'll come back to that here in a second. So if I come out here, and I'm just going to dynamically place this. Right in here looks good to me for right now. And I would just left click to place that named boundary at the location that I want. And then once it's finished, we're done with that. Now, once it's placed, you know, I could come in here and I could move my geometry to the correct spot, or if I don't have my sheet cut out yet, technically I could move this name boundary to the spot that I want. That's just a couple of manipulations that you may want to do before you actually go through there and process the sheets into a drawing model and sheet model. Okay. So it's pretty simple on that portion of it. It's just a matter of selecting the name boundary tool, setting this to design, figure out what name that you want it, whatever scale that you want, and then you place that out there accordingly. And then, like I said, you can move the name boundary afterwards, or you can move your geometry to get inside of that named boundary. And I will just hit F4 because I already have that name boundary placed. Next thing that we're going to do is, after the name boundary is placed, I'm going to come back up here to my name boundary tool right here. And instead of selecting the actual name boundary tool, there's a named boundaries little tool right here that pulls up the actual, all the name boundaries that you have inside of this file. So if I click on that little option right here, and we're going to utilize that option here, and also whenever Bill talks about his portion of it, if you click on that little icon, that's going to bring up the name boundaries toolbox. Let me get this kind of sized a little bit better. Okay. And once you have that, the first thing that I do want you to check is this box right here that says show the create drawing dialog. Wish we can find a way to default that, but by default it doesn't have it checked on. But we definitely want to have that checked on. That way we can possibly change some properties whenever we create our drawing model and our sheet model. The next thing that you would want to look at is which group that it's in. Now, if you're creating a detailed name boundary like what we're doing here, it's going to be placed underneath this group that says other groups. Now, if you went through there and actually did this, whenever Bill talks about this later on, whenever you go through an actual alignment, it'll actually place it underneath this plan groups folder or plan groups option. Same thing for your profile, same thing for your cross sections. If you're doing cross sections, it's going to put it underneath that particular group. But for our detail sheets, it's going to place it underneath the other groups. So if I expand that out, you just click on that little arrow beside it, you're going to see that we have that named boundary placed underneath there. And the name of it is the name that you placed whenever you created your named boundary. Of course, we named it typical section, and that's the name of it. But that's not actually the name of your drawing model and sheet model. Okay, so pretty minor on that. So if we're actually ready to create this into a drawing model and sheet model, what we're going to do is, of course, make sure this is toggled on like what it's shown right here. It's in blue. We're good to go there. And if you right click over this named boundary, go ahead and right click over it. You're going to get some different options. Mine didn't do that. It doesn't have an arrow. Anthony Forrest. Do you actually have a named boundary out there? If you can you show your screen, Tony?
You might have to explain how they share screens with the icon.
If you look up, if you're in Teams, if you look where you have the option to leave the team session, just to the left of that, there is a sharing option. It should be a sharing icon. You can click on that, and then you can share your screen.
A square box with an arrow pointing up.
Correct.
I didn't have that arrow either, but I closed the tool out and then opened it back up and it showed up. So
okay, Tony, you may go ahead and give that a try and see if that works. Okay, Tony's good. Awesome. Okay. Okay, like I said, make sure this show the create drawing dialog box is toggled on, like what it is now. And then over that named boundary, we're going to go ahead and right click over it. And then there's an option that says create drawing. And this will create our sheet model and our drawing model. Okay. Inside of here, you're going to see some different options. For the most part, you shouldn't have to change anything inside of here, except, at least for this section here, is the name. This name right here will be the name of your sheet model and your drawing model whenever you create it. So that's kind of something to kind of keep in mind whenever you do this. Now, for this one right here, we're actually going to create it inside of this file. So we're good to go there. In other tools, you can actually put it to a different file if you wish to do that whenever you're doing like your plan profile sheets. But for this option here, you really don't have that. You would just create it inside of this current file. But the name of it would be the name of your drawing model and your sheet model that gets created. And that's just something to kind of keep in mind for later on if you actually use the sheet index. It actually uses the sheet name, so you kind of want that to correspond to what type of sheet it is, whether it's a typical section or if it's your plan sheets or if it's your title sheet, something like that. So for this name here, I'll just leave it as is. That's fine, but just kind of keep that in mind that if you want to utilize your sheet index, you want this name to kind of correspond to what type of sheet that you're working with. And then the other thing that you would need to change is this scale right here. Okay, for your drawing model. And of course, I'm using a 1 to 5 inch for this right here. So I would do the same thing. I'm going to change this annotation scale to 1 to 5 inch. Or excuse me, 1 inch equals 5 foot. Change that to 1 inch equals 5 foot. And that's really the only two things that you really need to change inside of here. You shouldn't have to change anything else for that. Okay. And once you have that, let's go ahead and click on OK. And what you will get once it's done, it should create a drawing model and a sheet model from that default model named boundary that you placed. And you can see that right now. It has a sheet model, it has the border that's around it, and it takes all that geometry and it fits it inside of the sheet model. So if I come back into here, and there's a couple ways I can do this. If I go down in my lower left right here, this is one way that I can navigate between my default model or my sheet model or my drawing model. And you can kind of tell that by these little icons right here that I'm hovering over. That's one way to navigate between your different models. Okay. So if I go back to my default, you can kind of see that right here. Okay. So if I go back up and let's say I come up and go to my drawing model and I just place a couple lines across here, just to kind of show you how it does reflect inside of the sheet model. Anything that I do inside of here, it's going to reflect back to my sheet model. So since I've done that, now if I go back into my sheet model right here, you'll see that those have been modified. Okay. So like I said, the sheet model is just a byproduct of your drawing model or your sheet model. Now for these types of sheets here, there's a couple of ways you can do this. Just this is my honest opinion on this. One way is you can come up here and put everything in the default model and not worry about the drawing model so much, because you could come into your drawing model and you can add stuff inside of here and it's still going to reflect inside of your sheet model. Just to kind of show that. Let me come up here. Whoops. I don't want to do that. Don't want to do that. Let's just do I'm just going to put a scale in here just to kind of show how it works. So of course this is in the drawing model. It's not in my default model, but if I go to my sheet model, you'll see that it reflects both of those. So anything that I add to one or the other, it's going to reflect back to the sheet model. This is just the way Bentley kind of has this set up to where it creates the drawing model and the sheet model. Now for MoDOT production, this is just my opinion on this. For like your detail sheets, you could probably just place everything that you want inside the default model, like what I have right here for the most part. And then I could come back and it'll reflect back into my sheet model. And then the only thing that you'd have to do inside your sheet model is come into your border information right here for your title block and fill that out. And of course, those tools are going to be underneath here where you can go to the text and fill that information out. So that's kind of going to be kind of how you create your sheets in ORD for the sheets that need a border around it. Okay, kind of a big change with that. That's just the way Bentley kind of has that set up for the plan profile composition portion of it, and we're kind of using that same concept for the other detail sheets also. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on that? Questions or concerns or... And like I said, like Randall kind of showed you before, you know, we have videos on step by step on how this is all done, whether it's, you know, using the detail sheet like what we're doing right here, or if you're doing plan profile sheets, or if you're doing cross-section sheets, you know, afterwards, if you miss something or whatever, you can go back to those videos and it's going to show you step by step on how to utilize these tools. Okay. No questions? Either I'm really good at presenting or everybody knows what's going on. So that's good.
You're good, Chad.
Or everybody's shy to say anything.
You're my favorite.
Thank you, man.
Mine too.
Okay. The next thing that I will show you, will it auto scale text? Yes. If you go back into your, the scaling of text is annotation driven like before. So if you come up, you'd set your annotation scale to what you need it to be. Just like what this is doing right here. If I change this to 1 to 60 or 1 to, everything for how text is driven, how dimensions, cells, whatnot for the annotation scale, it works exactly the same as what it did in Power Geopack as it does in ORD. That concept is exactly the same, Matt. Okay.
So we're not going back to the plot scale days?
No.
I'm joking.
Those are the
I
good
know.
days.
I could if you want me to.
No, thank you.
Okay. So that's kind of what the name boundaries, how that's going to work and so forth. And this also, we've tested it through the crate renditions. It creates the sheet like it should and everything. So we should be good to go with that. The next thing that I was going to show you, and you can probably just watch on this one here, is how the sheet index works. And this is something that's going to be optional if you want to utilize it, or if you don't want to, that's perfectly fine also. So if you just kind of want to watch for right now, because I have a sheet index kind of already set up and so forth. But let me go ahead and let me close out this file. You can leave yours opened up for right now. Actually, I would prefer you to leave your file opened up. But I'm going to go ahead and check mine in. And let me go ahead and get back into ProjectWise. And I have a project that I have created. Let me see if I can find it. It's underneath Central Office. Of course, it's with some of the testing that I've done with it. And I'm going to open up this. I'll just open up number 2 right here. And basically with the sheet index, after you've gone through and possibly created some of your sheet models for the border that it needs, or if you created all of them, you can actually go through there and place those in a sheet index. And if you want to easily navigate between those different sheet models, maybe you want to open one of those up real quick, you can actually double left click on it from the sheet model versus going up to the file pull down and trying to open it up. You can kind of navigate between those different sheet models very quickly. That's one good thing about the sheet index that can be utilized. Another thing is you can actually print through the sheet index. That's another thing that you can utilize, and we'll kind of maybe show a little bit of that inside of here also. Okay, so to kind of get to the sheet index, and it doesn't matter what workflow that you're working with, I'm just setting mine back to the Open Roads modeling workflow. Over to the left is the Explorer. Used to be called Project Explorer in Power Geopack. Now it's just been renamed to Explorer. And I'm going to go ahead and pin that to make life a little bit easier on me. And I'm going to truncate or collapse the file option. And you got some different options through here that you can explore, whether it's the file or items or resources or whatnot, depending on which mode that you're working with. But the one that we're going to talk about right now for the next few minutes is the sheet index. So if I expand that out, you're going to see this roadway option underneath here. And for you guys, if you look at it, it's going to be blank. And if you look at the top through here, you're going to have some different options. Okay. If you need to modify your sheet index to possibly add or subtract sheet models to and from there, you would go through here and click on that modify or manage. That's what's called manage. Oh, excuse me, modify. And once you've done that, it's going to expand out and give you some more options. Well, this is where you can go through here and actually add your sheet models that you created and put it inside of this sheet index. And I already have some that's already added to here. And you'll see that I have this title sheet, which is actually this sheet right here. Let me go to this file right here actually has a sheet model inside of here, and I attach that sheet model to my sheet index for this right here. Same thing for these typical sections. They each have a sheet model inside there, and it's kind of contained inside that sheet index for each one of these sheet models that are contained inside one of these sheets. Same thing for my quantities. If you look at my quantities, I just have one file, but I actually have 3 named boundaries inside there. So I have 3 named boundaries, and of course I'm going to have 3 different sheet models. So if I go back to my file here, you'll see that this right here for this index, I have all 3 of those inside there. And then of course my plan profile sheet that's underneath here. So to actually add a sheet to a sheet index, what I would do, just to kind of show you this, if I come up to my roadway, that's going to be the name of it. And this sheet index file automatically gets created, and I'll kind of show you which file that it's utilizing for the sheet index. That way you don't go through there and possibly delete it. But this roadway, if I select it, I can come up here in this option and click on the sheet or add sheet. And then it's going to go through here and prompt me to figure out which file that I want to grab that contains an actual sheet. So just for class purposes here, I'll just go back down to my training sandbox. And I think I can use the one that I just created because let's see here, sheets, typical section. Yep. And I will go ahead and click on add. And once I have that, and I go ahead and click on OK, hopefully it'll give me the option to actually see that sheet model inside there. And of course it does. It shows me that sheet model. So I can actually select that and click on OK, and it's going to add that sheet model to my sheet index right here. It opened it up. Do I want to check it in? Yeah, I'll go ahead and check it in. And you'll see that it added that sheet index inside here. Okay, so that's how you would add a sheet to a sheet index. Okay, so basically that sheet index is tied, or excuse me, that sheet model is tied to this index. So if I want to navigate between, since I have a sheet index inside here, I have files inside of a sheet index. If I want to navigate between these, let's say I want to get to a different file, instead of using the file pull down and getting to that, I can actually come over here, and this is one useful way for using the sheet index, is I can just simply double left click on that sheet file, or excuse me, that typical section sheet. It'll prompt me to check my roadway DGN WS file, which that is the actual file that it's using for the sheet index. The sheet index is basically this DGN WS file. It's going to prompt me to check the other one in. I will go ahead and check it in. So if you ever see that inside of your, go back inside here, just to kind of show you. If I go underneath like the roadway work area, if you see this roadway.dgnws file, that is the sheet index file. So whenever you modify a sheet index, this is the file that it's pulling from. So You really don't want, actually, you don't want to delete this file, or you don't want to delete this configuration file either. Okay, so let me go back into the file here, and you'll see now that it automatically navigated to that particular sheet model. Yeah, you can drag those around if you wish to do that. You can do that, Tony. Yeah, if you messed around with some of these and you want to reorder those, you can do that. So if I want, let's say for some reason I needed my let's say I wanted my quantities to be in front of my typical sections, which normally you wouldn't have that, but just to kind of show you, you can select those and you can actually go through here and you can see that I'm moving those. And wherever I have that blue line, you know, I can get it in between there and it should move those accordingly, like what it did right there. So you can rearrange those after the fact if you add a sheet. Kind of like what we did for a typical section here. If you want to move that, you know, to be underneath there, you can do that. No problem there. So something that you can utilize if you wish. If you don't want to utilize that sheet index, that's perfectly fine too. A few other things that you can do inside there, you can actually create folders. So if you want to break that out, let's say you got a large project and you want all of your plan sheets underneath one folder and all your typical sections underneath one folder, or you want all your cross sections underneath one folder versus having a very, very long sheet index, you could break those out accordingly. You know, you can come through here, create a folder and name it, you know, cross sections, and you can place all your cross section files underneath there. That's another way you kind of organize that, depending on how big or small of a project that you have. Okay. Another thing with the sheet index, which we're going to look into at a later date, which I kind of showed you in a previous video through the WebEx, is the title block integration with it. That is set up and it does work, but the create renditions currently doesn't read that, doesn't read these fields properly. So we're going to have to kind of hold off on that portion of it. So I'm not going to go over that again. So if you want to fill out your title block information, what you need to do is come up and go to the MODOC CAD standards and get to the proper text that you need, whether it's the district or route or county or job number. Select that and fill out that information accordingly. Okay. So that's pretty much all I'm going to really talk about on the sheet index. Like I said, excuse me. You can utilize that if you wish. If you don't want to utilize that, that's perfectly fine too. But it does make navigating between sheets, you know, a lot easier versus going up and clicking on the file open and so forth. Can you hear me now? All right. I accidentally hit the little deal on my my mic. Okay. Can you create renditions from the sheet index? No. No. You have to go through ProjectWise to do the sheet for the create renditions. That's a ProjectWise functionality, and you can't do that. Now you can print. You can print through the sheet index, which we may go over here in a little bit, but you can't do the create renditions through the sheet index. Does that make sense, Tony? Okay. Good question. All right. Any other questions? Going once. Going twice. Sold. All right. Printing. I think we talked about this in a WebEx also, but on the printing side of it, we have it set up to where it's going to print out the sheet model or a fence. If you want to print a fence like what you do in Power Geopack now, where you can go through there and just go out there, put a fence and print that out, you'll have that option also. But the only difference is we're going to set it up to where it just prints out a PDF file, and then you go through there and print that PDF file to whichever printer that you want. That's the way our printing is going to be set up in ORD. And there's multiple reasons for this, but it just makes management on our end a lot easier versus trying to go through there and setting up the plotters and different plotters through each district. Another thing is IS, they make changes to the printers and plotters, and we may not know about it till after the fact. So it just makes management a lot easier for us on the printer side of it and getting all the weights and so forth. It makes management a lot easier for us. And it makes more sense too, because with us doing the work from home portion of it, it's a lot easier where we can create a mobile PDF of it that we can send to somebody else, or if you get back in the office, you can take that PDF and you can send it to the plotter accordingly. So we'll kind of show you a few different options with that through the printing portion of it inside of ORD. So if you're currently in your typical section file, which I will go ahead and open up that file also. I think it was this one. Yes.
Chad, did you explain that when you switch projects, it will prompt you to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whenever you, if you go between different projects, it'll actually prompt you to open up a different workspace, because the workspace is different between different projects. So if you ever get prompted with that, you just go ahead and select OK. That way it can reload ORD to get to that particular workspace that it needs to.
And that affects your index file too.
Yes. One thing that I did mention or forgot to mention on the index file is once that sheet model is used inside of a sheet index, that sheet model cannot be used in another sheet index. It's basically tied to that sheet index. It knows it's a part of that. So you should never have to worry about this, but if you try to use if you have one that's attached to a different sheet index and then you try to attach that sheet model to a different sheet index, it will not work. It'll say it's a part of a different set. You can't utilize it. So you'd have to you have to delete that sheet model from the sheet index that it's previously using.
And you probably just want to stay within one project.
You would stay within the project for the most part. You are correct, Chris. Okay. So I'm back in the file that you guys should be currently in. And like I showed before, you can navigate between your models with this particular option down below here, or you can do it a little bit differently. I'll show you the other option. Underneath most of these workflows through here, if I go to like Open Roads Modeling and I go to the Home tab, you're going to have this little blue icon right here underneath your primary tools. This is where you can open up your models, and you can open up the model accordingly, which this is right here. So that's another way to get to your sheet model that's inside this file. Okay. All right. Now to the printing. Like I said, we have it set to where it prints out a PDF. A couple ways we can do this. We can easily select the print icon up here at the top underneath of our quick access toolbar. That's one way that you can get to it, and that's probably what you would do a majority of the time. Another way that you can get to it is from the backstage. So if you go to the file pull down and go to print, you can actually get to it this way also. Okay, where you come up here and just select print. I think you can do the print to PDF too, and I think it brings up the same options, but I would just do the print. So for class here, I'm going to select this option right here that says print, and I'm inside the sheet model, at least for right now. So I select it, and this kind of brings up the printing inside of ORD. Okay, and this is kind of the printing that would come basically kind of out of the box. We've customized it, you know, somewhat to get it to print out the way we want it, but this is kind of printing that is set up with the ORD product. You're not going to have the printing routine like what you had in Power Geopack SS10 or SS4 or whichever version previously, because we don't have a programmer in IS that we have set up the printing portion of it, so we're kind of using the out of the box stuff, but it works pretty good. So once I'm inside of here, all I would need to do, if I'm just printing out just my normal sheet, okay, just a normal sheet, I would come through here and figure out which one that I would want to use for my printer, and I can either use the mo.pdf fence or the mo.pdf sheet. And for this example here, I'm just going to use the sheet. And that should be, if I'm printing out a B-size sheet, that should be the only thing that I would need to do. I shouldn't have to really do anything else. Now, if I do come in here and I change that, let's say I'm coming through here and I want to print this out from a B-size sheet to a D-size sheet. Okay. You'll see that it looks a little bit differently in my preview. Well, if that preview gets modified, I may have to come up here and maximize my print size. Okay. So if you change your size of your sheet, just go up here and make sure you maximize your size, do the maximize print size. But for this example here, I'm just going to do a B-size sheet. You can kind of see that it changed there, and I'm good to go. Of course, I have some other attributes that I could change if I need to, but if I'm just printing out just a normal sheet like what I'm doing here, that should be the only thing that I would really need to do. Everything else is already set up. So I'd come up here and click on the print to file. Next thing that's going to do is prompt me, where do I want to put this PDF? Because like I said, it's going to print to a PDF. By default, it's going to place it underneath the roadway work area, which is this location right here. That's where it's going to dump it by default. If I need to change that, you would come up here and change it to whichever folder that I want to place it at. Maybe I have a separate place for all my PDF files. I'd maybe create a folder for just my PDF files, or if I want to dump underneath them, the folder that it corresponds to, maybe like the typical sections, I could just click on that folder and it'll dump it to that folder. And that's what I'll do for a class here. So once I have the folder defined that I want to print it to, just go ahead and click on OK. And then click on Save. You'll kind of see it do its thing. Usually it's fairly quick. And then once it's done, I can go back into ProjectWise. And if I go to my proper project, go to O2 typical section, you'll see my PDF is there. So if I double left click on it to open up, you'll see my PDF is there. Then I would come up to my print and print it to whichever printer that I have set up at my district. Okay, so that's just doing a normal sheet, normal B size sheet or D size, depending on which size that you created. I think that's pretty simple on that portion of it. Should prompt me to check it in. I'll check that file in. Okay. So that's printing the sheet model. Now, let's backtrack a little bit here. Let's say I want to print out just a section of something. Okay. Let's say I go back to I could probably do it from here, but I'll just go back to my models here and I'll go back to my default model. Go back to my default model. And then underneath my Open Roads modeling workflow, I'll go to the Home tab. And underneath the Home tab, I will go through here and select my fence tools. Now, let's say I just want to print out just a small section of something. Maybe I want to bring this out to the field for a field check or something like that, or I just want to blow something up to maybe print out to maybe get more detail of what's going on. So I can just put a fence around that area, and then I would do the same thing that I did before. But this time, whenever I click on the print, I would come up here and change my option to from sheet. I'm going to change that to fence. Next thing that I will do after I change that to fence, so it looks for the fence instead of the actual sheet, I would need to come up down below here and figure out what size that I want to place it on. So normally you'll probably put it on a B-size sheet or whatever. Just keep in mind that this is not a exact scaled representation of what's going on. So it really doesn't matter which one that you select. It all depends on which type of sheet that you're printing it out to. I'm just going to use a B size for this option. And of course, I'm going to maximize my print size. That way it gets all that information inside of that fence that I have defined. Okay. That's the only thing that I really did there. Change that to fence, change that to whichever size that I need to. And then I will go ahead and maximize out my print size. And this would be the same concept. We'll do the print to file here in a second. But this would be the same concept if you're doing a preliminary strip map. So if you go out there, for those of you that have done a preliminary strip map for maybe like a public display or something like that, you'd go out there and place that cell. And then once that cell is placed out there, you can go through there and actually create a fence from point A to point B around those parameters for it. And then whenever you come up here and do the printing portion of it, you go through here and find that size of the actual print, or excuse me, of the preliminary strip map that you selected. So if it was like an 8-foot strip map, you would select this option inside of here. Okay, so once those are defined, then I can come up here and just simply do it like before. I would hit the print to file, figure out where I want to place it at. This one here, I will just put a -123 or -AA behind it. That way I don't rename the other one, and I'll place it underneath the same location of my one that I just created, which is underneath O2 typical section. Once I have that defined, I will go ahead and click on Save. And if I go back inside of here now, you'll see that that AA file for that typical section is now created. And then, of course, I can print that out to whichever printer that I want. So that's utilizing the fence option. And I will go ahead and check that one in since I closed it down. And like I said, of course, you can come through here, and if you need to change just some of these other attributes if needed, like for your color, maybe I want to print this out in color for a strip map, you know, I can go through here and change that color to what it needs to be. And there's also some other settings underneath here for your print attributes. Most of these are already going to be set to what it needs to, but if there's certain things that you may need to toggle on, maybe like a transparency that you've placed, you can come up here and edit that accordingly for that particular one-time print that you're sending it out to. So there is some options inside of here. I mean, I'm not going to go through every single situation, but you basically have the same options of what you had before on the printing. It's just that it's going to print out to a PDF versus it directly sending it to the plotter. Okay. So let me go ahead and close this down right here. And you can see right now I don't have anything in my sheet index. So that's kind of the printing portion of it. I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory on how the printing is set up. It's just that it's going to send it to an actual PDF versus it sending it to a plotter like what it does in Power Geopack right now. That's one way to print the sheets if you're actually in the file. Now, another way that you can do it is through the sheet index. You'll probably have to watch since you don't have a sheet index set up, but just to kind of show you, and I have videos that are out there already. So if you do utilize a sheet index, in the future, and you want to do the printing, some printing through the sheet index, you can go back and look at those videos, but I'll kind of demonstrate that here right now. So let me go ahead and close out of this file. Could have just done a file open, but okay. So let me go back to my project up here that has a sheet index. And there's one way that I can tell that these are actually attached to a sheet index is if I go back down below here to my other project. I'll explain these icons while we're going through. You'll notice here right now that this icon right here is just the Open Roads icon. So basically that means that it's going to open up in this application. Pretty self-explanatory on that portion of it. The next icon that you may see is an icon with just the letter, well, not the letter E, but it looks like a structure right here. Kind of similar to what you see in Power Geopack right now on your MicroStation icon. If it just has just this one right here, that's called a basically a hierarchy or a structure tree. It just tells you that it has reference files attached to it. So if I right click over the file and go to set show references, that just tells me that there's reference files attached to it. Okay. But for this particular file right here, along with these typical sections and this title sheet and these quantities, you're going to notice that it has a kind of like a white and also a black structure tree. If you see that little black one there, that kind of means that it's this file is tied to somewhere else. Okay, and it's tied to it because we're using a sheet index. Okay, so that sheet model is tied back to the sheet index file, which is this one right here. So that's why you have another little icon that looks like it's in black. So just it's linked to another file somewhere else. All right, let me go ahead and open up this file to kind of show you how you can print through the sheet index. Okay. So right now I'm in the sheet index, or excuse me, I'm in this file, and I'm going to go ahead and open up my sheet index. I don't need to open up to edit it. I could if I wanted to, but I don't really need to. But this is where I can come in here and I should be able to go ahead and print out one of these sheets to a PDF. Now I would just be able to do the sheet model. I can't do a fence because I'm not actively in it. But if I just want to print out the actual sheet model, I should be able to do it inside of my sheet index. So if I right click over it, excuse me, been a little bit since I've done this. Okay, you actually have to open up the print organizer. So inside the sheet index, it's going to utilize the print organizer. So I would need to select that. And then you'd come up here and figure out which style that you want to use. Well, you can't really use a fence because we don't have a fence defined out there inside the one that you want or multiple ones that you want. So I will just use the one that says sheet. That's really the only option that's going to be utilized if you're going to print through the sheet index. Cancel. You guys should not get that. There's something that's tied on my machine that's causing that, but on your machine you shouldn't get that. But with that file that I had selected, you're going to notice that it's going to allow you to print out that one file. Okay, let me go ahead and close out of this. Let me actually select the actual roadway sheet index and do the same thing. Then it should give me the list of all of those. Like I said, those 3 prompts right there, you should not get. But now you'll notice that it's going to open up this roadway P set, which is called a print set. And this is where you can come in here and actually print out one or multiple sheets at one time. So just kind of show an example here. Let's say I want to print out number 1. Let's do 1, 3, and 6. Once I have those selected or all of them selected, whichever ones, if I click on print, whenever you do the print, it's going to give you the option to do one of 2 things. You can do a selection, like what I'm doing right here. I'm doing a selection set. I could print them all, so I would do all of them. So that's a couple different options there. The other thing that you can look at is how do you want it to be printed? You have the option to do separate print jobs, where it'll print those out into separate files or separate PDF files, or you have the option to where you can print all those out into one bundle. So if you had, let's say, 3 sheets like what we currently have, and you want those all to be in one PDF file for whatever reason, maybe you want to send this out to somebody and you want to have all those PDFs inside of one PDF file versus them being separate, you could do that, like what I'm doing right here. Okay. Then you have to determine where you want to place it at, and I'll just place it underneath the roadway folder. I'll just leave it set to that by default. Of course, you can change it by clicking on the browse. You can determine where you want to place it at. And of course, I can open up the file after the creation. So, kind of some toggles through here that you can do depending on how you want it to print. So if I go ahead and click on OK, it'll go through there and print out number 1, number 3 for the name, and also number 6, whichever ones that I had selected. It's going to print those out into a single PDF file with those 3 sheet models contained inside there. Now, it may take a little bit of time for it to create, depending on how many that you have, but eventually it will go through there and actually create those into a single PDF file. So that's kind of one way that you can print through the that's one way that you can print through the sheet index if you wish to utilize that. Another way that you can do it is you can do it, like I said, instead of doing it by a bundle like what we're doing right here, You can actually do it to where they create it as separate PDFs, and it will print those out into separate PDFs to the location that you want, versus going through and opening up each one of those and printing those out. And you'll see once now that it's done, if I go back into ProjectWise and I go underneath the roadway, which I think that's where I placed it, you'll see that that PDF file is created. So if I double left click on it, it'll name roadway. You'll see that those 3 files are stored in that one PDF file. Close that down. And it should prompt me to check it in. And we're good there. So that's a few options with the printing that you can do using the sheet index. Another way you can do it, of course, you can create them as separate PDFs. And just to kind of demonstrate that, I'll do the same 3, but this time I will go ahead and right click over it and I can do a print. You can create these as separate print jobs. Now, when you do that, of course, you want to figure out what location that you want to place it under. Right now, it's going to go underneath this location right here, underneath the root of roadway, which we'll leave it set to that. Another thing that you can do is, if you want to print those out in the source location of where the file is at, you could click on this box. So since I know maybe this PDF file, excuse me, this sheet model is in a separate folder, this quantity sheet is in a separate folder for quantities, this one here is in a separate folder for, typical sections. If I want those PDF files to be created underneath the root of that file, I could just simply select this option right here and it'll dump it in underneath that source location. Or if I want those to all be created into one separate folder, like what I will do for this example, you would just uncheck that and determine which folder that you want to place it at. So a couple different options with that. But the one thing that you need to look at is your output name, output file name. Okay. This will determine on how the name of the file will be created. Okay. So if you click on this down arrow, you're going to see some different options depending on how you want the name of the PDF to be created as. Okay, there's a lot of different options. I think you can create a custom one, which we may look at here in the near future. But let's say I want it to be the just the source file name. Okay, that way the name of it corresponds to my file name. I could do that. Or where's it at again? Source file name. There we go. Now we'll click on OK. And I will go ahead and do the selection set and click on OK to that. And of course, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to go through there and print those out into separate PDFs. Not sure how long it will take to do it, but we'll just kind of sit back and wait for that portion of it. Does anybody got any questions on the printing? That's pretty much about it with that. Like I said, there's some options inside the printing that you can toggle on for your transparencies or line weights if you, for some reason, didn't want those turned on. There's some different attributes with that. But does anybody got any questions on the printing, on how it's set up and how it works? Hopefully I explained it halfway decent. And now those PDFs are underneath there. And of course, if I go ahead and double left click on them, you'll see that they're all printed out as separate PDFs. And I'll just check it in. All right. So that's the sheet index and how you can utilize it. You can navigate between files like what you're doing, like we did previously. You can also use it for the printing portion of it if you want to. All right. No questions? Okay, no one's saying anything or through the chats. So on the MicroStation side of it for ORD, that's pretty much all that's really new with it. The rest of the stuff, like I said, it's pretty much exactly the same, except for where, like Randall said, where the tools are located at. And then the other big change was, of course, the name boundary, like I showed you, and then the sheet index if you want to utilize that, along with the printing that I just showed you.
So Chad, if you're done, Shannon, would you want to start off at 11 or?
There's only one more thing that I was going to show, but that'll only take like a couple minutes.
Okay, sounds good.
Yep. The only other thing that I was going to show is in the PowerPoint, which I don't have. Randall, do you still have the PowerPoint opened up? I'm going to have Randall go ahead and share his screen. So let me go ahead and stop sharing mine for just a second. And I'm going to let Randall go ahead and share his screen. Go ahead and go back up just one slide.
Is that the slide you wanted?
Yeah, that's not the slide I wanted, but that'll work. There you go. That's the slide I want.
How about them Chiefs?
Not that. There you go. Stop. Don't move. Okay. The drainage side of it, it's pretty much identical, at least the way it functions as it did in Power Geopack. Basically, the tools are all the same. The only thing that's really different, well, actually, not really different, but the only thing that's now available is we have the videos for the drainage tools out there on our YouTube site. So before, we didn't have any videos that were out there for how the tools work and how they're demonstrated, because we were going to get ready to go to once the drainage got set up, we were getting ready to go to ORD, so there's really no reason to create videos in Power Geopack and then just turn right back around and create videos for the drainage in ORD. So we got all the videos out there in ORD for that now. So if you're beginning a new drainage project and you want to kind of look at that and kind of how it's set up and so forth, you can do that. And I will go ahead and share my screen again. And basically, with the drainage tools, you just go to your workflows up here. If you're starting a brand new drainage project, you would go up to drainage and utilities, and it's going to have all the drainage tools that you need to do a drainage project. Okay, you get your layout, your analysis, components, and so forth. So all that stuff is kind of already pre-positioned to where it should be, depending on how you're going to do your drainage project. And just to kind of show you the videos that are out there, I will go to our YouTube page, and we have a playlist right here, and I can view my playlist for the drainage. And this is one way that I can go through here and look at the introduction, how the project defaults are set up, how the catalogs and prototypes are set up, and I can scroll down through here and kind of look at these. Also, if you get closer to the bottom, we actually have some exercises that we normally do in class on how to do maybe like a culvert or a simple stormwater drainage network, kind of how that all works and intertwines with your models and so forth. We also have one that for a simple detention basin. So if you want to kind of look at that, and also with the ditches and so forth. So a lot of videos that we created out there for drainage. Hopefully once we get ORD, implemented and so forth, I'll come back to that and maybe add some more videos for that, depending on what type of projects that, our users are doing. But like I said, those videos are out there for you to look at if you're starting a drainage project also now. With that, I'm finished. So if you guys got any questions, feel free to call Kevin Vollett or Randall Hoskins, and they will be more than willing to help you out.
Chad's pretty winded.
So, Shannon, did you want to give them like a 15-minute break and start up, or what would you like to do?
Yeah, 11's good.
Okay, let's start back up at 11 o'clock, and we'll start with Shannon once we come back.
All right, thank you, everyone.
And we'll probably go to about 11:30, take lunch, and then come back after lunch. So.